afternoon. The intent here for this particular session is to kind of connect a little bit with the theme of the Global Entrepreneurship Community Summit, which is designing the future. And I know a lot of conversations. This stage, yesterday, the stage behind, and multiple rooms upstairs have been talking about a whole bunch of things that relates to the future, and even the conversation just now, right? But while we can talk about all those aspirations, while we can talk about the future per se, I believe we've got to have the ability and the capability to be able to roll it back. Imagination of 5, 10, 20 years down the road is needed. But what is also needed is the ability to roll it back, to look at something executable within the next 6 to 12 months. Because otherwise, the conversation that we're having in this forum or any other forums will just be mere conversations, right? So allow me to kind of kick things off a bit. So in the context of Malaysia, and some of you guys are aware of this, there's a new economic policy that was the Vision 2020, and right now, the country is talking about TN50 or National Transformation 2050. And what has happened for the benefit of our foreign participants in particular is that it was a grassroots feedback. And there were a lot of aspirations that was put forward in terms of how people see we live in the future to come, right? But again, I come from a very practical point of view, and I would like to share the practicality of things, of the how, and how do we get there. Aspirations are awesome again, but if you can't do anything about it, if you can't get ourselves organized about it, it will be ending up as pure aspirations. Again, when we talk about industries of the future, we know these are the usual statistics that we see, right? We can talk about AI, IoT, blockchain, and all those things across. But while these are the growth rates within the different sectors that we are living in today, we got to also start pushing boundaries. Again, when we talk about pushing boundaries, it cannot just be conversations. The conversations are awesome from activating our thought process, but it's got to go beyond conversations. And we've got to start imagining, kind of putting the plots forward. What are the things that we're going to fill up in those bubbles that we talk about in the future? And if you talk to any futurist, right, it's not so much about prediction per se. It's not so much about, this guy's so brilliant that he knows how the future is going to be. And this is what everyone needs to understand. When people talk about future, when people talk about designing the future, it's anticipating the possible scenarios that can happen in that future that we're talking about. And once you're able, and when you talk about anticipating, there's no one clear answer. And I think some of the conversations in the previous session just now, right, and some of the questions that you guys were asking, is it going to be like this? Is it going to be like that? You can't really say. What we've got to be ready is to be prepared with the kind of variance of possibilities that may happen, because that's reality. If our mindset is so stuck into a particular focus, right, we will not be able to be agile enough to change, especially when we're leveraging on technologies. And Cohen said that again just now, even when we talk about smart cities, right? You can't say that smart cities, we need to have this, this, and this, because things are going to change and how that dynamic, and things are changing really fast. So we're putting across a hypothesis, and for some of you guys who were at the launch yesterday, Prime Minister kind of mentioned 5 areas that we're looking around in terms of industries of the future. And these are, smart city or sustainable cities. So personally, I use the word smart city and sustainable city interchangeably. I kind of prefer sustainable cities, because as Cohen said just now, the minute you put smart city, our immediate connotation is we're living in a pure tech world. But the reality is we need to live in a very balanced world. So I personally prefer sustainable cities. Agriculture, mobility, clean energy, and health, right? And why are these things important? Now, we've gone through a phase where the app economy was thriving before, and every single thing is uploaded into an Apple Store or a Google Play Store and so forth. But as we move forward, and when we're talking about the blockchains and IoTs and stuff, these technologies actually is now, not just now, but it's going more mainstream into areas that we're talking about identified in these 5 spaces right now. And it's going into in a more deeper way also. It affects regulations. It affects how we react, how we interact with things. It affects our lifestyle. And when we look back, at least from the Malaysian context, ladies and gentlemen, to the aspiration of TN50, a lot of the aspirations, while it's not specific, relates to these 5 areas. And what we're trying to kind of propagate across to a larger community, and it's not just a Malaysian community per se, is that how do we plant the seeds today towards those aspirations? How do we make sure that they're not just theoretical aspirations, theoretical blueprints, that the people that we have here today have the right mindset, setting, seeds to be able to lead towards those aspirations, essentially. Yeah? So, the questions that we ask is pretty much, can we make that shift? How are we going to be shaping the ecosystem for all these things that's coming in the future? Because if you don't do those things, you're living in a set of rules that is a mismatch with whatever you aspire to be. And if you don't make those changes today, it may just be too late for you to capture those aspirations, and it ends up being just that again. Right? So as we're putting this across, there's a few hypotheses that we've kind of put forward in putting that framing in mind. So number one, as I mentioned, that there's a need to shape the ecosystem for future economies or industries of the future. But in order to be able to do this well enough, there are a few strategies that we think that needs to be placed in. I'll talk a little bit about exponential entrepreneurs. I'll talk a little bit about innovation capital. I'll talk also a little bit about the whole idea of collaborative entrepreneurship. Now, the term exponential entrepreneur is not as mainstream, but it is not new also. When we talk about exponential entrepreneurs, right, we feel that there is a need to get every single entrepreneur out there to have this kind of a mindset. And this is important. From an ecosystem builder point of view, you can't develop and groom entrepreneurs in the ways that we've been doing today. It's going to take too long. The world is moving so rapidly. Industry Revolution 4.0 is changing how things are done. Time is also of the essence. If you take the old traditional path, it may just not be timely enough for you to even get into the market. So we like to say that exponential entrepreneurs or exponential thinking is going to be the new normal as we move forward. It's going to be the new normal as we look towards industries of the future. And I'm assuming the questions that people ask is, okay, what do we really mean with regards to exponential entrepreneurs? So there are 3 fundamental principles that people talk about when they mention exponential entrepreneurs. Number 1 is an entrepreneur that's able to lead on exponential technologies. And these are the conversations that we're having today, in the previous session also. We're talking about IoT, blockchain, and artificial intelligence and so forth. But bear in mind, yeah, when we talk about this, and even some of the questions just now asking between an AI entrepreneur and a normal entrepreneur, right? Things are getting grayer. But what's important out there are entrepreneurs who are able to blend the 2 things together, who are able to make sense of what's needed from a people point of view, from a user point of view, from a lifestyle point of view. That's not coming from a pure technology point of view. And that's very important. There tends to be too much biasness sometimes, right? That you're talking the exciting conversation of AI and blockchain and all that. But those are just enablers. So again, we would like to imagine a fashion entrepreneur that's able to look at these leading technologies. We would like to look at F&B entrepreneurs to be able to have that shift in mindset and how they can leverage on all these things too. So it's not just about the tech guys talking about AI and seeing how that can be applied or bring an enabler to some other thing. And the thing is, it is doable even today. We've got companies like IBM Watson and Microsoft that's actually providing tool sets that does not require you as an entrepreneur to have super deep knowledge, but you as an entrepreneur needs to have the aspiration, the appreciation of the possibilities that can happen. And the reality, even if you take ASEAN as a whole population, right? Ratios between an AI expert and the community that has a whole bunch of other business is probably a quarter to a three-quarter ratio. So again, let's shift also our thinking on imagining what kind of behaviors and lifestyle people are doing way forward, but understand the possibilities that these technologies can do to your business, right? So don't be fearful too much about the tech component, because I see a lot of people, when the minute you start having the conversation of Industry Revolution 4.0, it goes, whew, that's not for me, I don't think I can do this, I'm in this space. But please, ladies and gentlemen, it's within our hands. It is definitely doable. All that's required is a better appreciation of the possibilities. Second component, when we talk about leaning on psychological tools, let's break it down to something simpler, right? For me, psychological tools just means the ability to process things, to look into new markets and new business models, right? An entrepreneur that's able to think along those lines, right, would be categorically be placed as an exponential entrepreneur. Third, last but not least, leaning on the power of the crowd for capital and resources. And I love the last example that Cohen was sharing just now about, disrupting Uber, so to speak. The model that he described is literally this third bit. He is leveraging on the power of cab drivers, right, to put on a platform that disrupts a platform that was disrupting the sector. So number 2 and number 3 are sometimes interrelated. The ability, either with design thinking or any other tool sets out there, to shift markets, to shift business models, and then applying it either via technology or via leveraging the crowd. And if an entrepreneur is able to have 1, 2, 3 of this combination, then we believe, right, the landscape of entrepreneurship, the type of entrepreneurs that's going to be coming out, is going to be able to be those kind of entrepreneurs that's going to be creating solutions that are viable and that's going to be shaping how the future is going to be. Second bit of the equation just now, when we talk about capital, so a lot of people talk about capital. But the normal conversation when we talk to the money guys, MaGIC was here just now, right, is always, I don't have enough deal flows. Correct, MaGIC? Well, and when you talk to entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs will say there's constantly not enough money in the system. And then what government tends to do is that, oh, okay, there's not enough money, let's inject some more capital, either in whatever form that may be. Sometimes it happens in Malaysia, sometimes it happens in other parts of the globe too. But again, if you reflect back upon things, it is actually, there's enough capital out there, there's enough entrepreneurs out there too. What is really, really lacking, I'm having conversations about this with a couple of people, is the ability to do conversions of those capital, the ability to guide the entrepreneurs. Now, we all know statistically, right, in the region of ASEAN, we have a large youth population who are venturing into an entrepreneurship path. But for the most part, they have not had an experience of any fundraising, structuring things, pitching things well enough. So again, in order to shape this thing tightly through, it's, yes, you want to increase the capital within the system, but that's not the root problem yet. The root is actually trying to find ways to increase better conversion for both sides of the equation. Only then the ecosystem will start moving again. Because otherwise, every time you talk to money people, it's always the same thing. Not enough deal flows. You talk to entrepreneurs, that's not enough capital. Collaborative entrepreneurship. Now, a lot of people, I hate and not hate the word. I hate the word simply because I think it's also overused. Everyone talks about collaboration, right? But if I take from a more fundamental factor of collaboration, it does begin with intent. Saying collaboration without the right intent will not lead to the end goal also. Everyone's aware of the players within the ecosystems itself. But the question that we all got to be asking ourselves, right? Everybody knows collaboration is important. Everybody knows that combinations of private sector, public sector, universities, capital are important. But there's still lack of efficiency in how that's done. And it's not yielding the necessary results that we would love to desire, essentially, right? And again, in any organization, if I take from a Malaysian context, vision can be set from the top, but not everything can be a top-down instruction per se. Because everyone has got to feel immersive enough in appreciating what needs to be done in order to actually get into a shared common interest in achieving that goal. Only then, true collaboration can actually happen. I'm sure we've all been in various conversations that stems on the premise of collaboration, but doesn't necessarily yield the results of the collaboration that we speak about, right? And again, as basic as it sounds, it is really about the intent and how you mesh this intent together. And for us, it's looking at innovation labs as a key strategy to bring people of common interest together. Why is that the case? Well, we think right now, every single organization or even individual, right, talks about innovation, talks about digital transformation. So there is that common thread of intent at every single level, coming from aspiring entrepreneur that's trying to do something that changes the world, to a new entrepreneur, to an SME, to a corporation, and even government, right? So at every single point, everyone is talking about innovation, digital transformation, and so forth. So if we're able to push across a proposition that let's come together in an innovation lab environment for a common goal, because collaborations tends to start not from a common goal. Collaborations normally begin, I need to achieve something, can I go and talk to you, you, and see whether you can help achieve my goal or not? That's how normally conversations of collaboration happen. So we're trying to even tweak how collaborations happen here by designing a common goal. If you can't design a common goal, it's nice superficial conversation, nice coffee chat conversations. You feel good coming out of it, but nothing comes out of it. I see you got some good experience there too, is it? So again, So that's our premise in terms of driving collaborative entrepreneurship. The word is not new. Even Innovation Labs has been used in many other places, but we're now trying to drive it out again, rejuvenate that again, reactivate that again, so that we can all work towards a common goal in collaboration. Now, having that stage setting, right? The Prime Minister also announced about innovation superclusters yesterday, looking at those 5 areas that we're talking about. 5 areas that we're setting as an initial start of industries of the future. How do we get the jigsaw puzzles together? How do we get things together to make sure that these things happen? It's naturally not going to be an overnight exercise, but it's an exercise nevertheless that's needed. Now, as we move into this thread of conversation, while I give some reference to TN50 and the Malaysian context, what I'm trying to share also with the audience here today and beyond is that this effort cannot be from a country-specific point of view. This effort has got to be, at the very least, a regional effort, if not a global effort. Again, coming back to the point before, only then the ability to harness best-of-breed talents, best-of-breed minds can happen. So these are the building blocks when one speaks about an innovation supercluster. They're building blocks because they're jigsaw puzzles that needs to just come together at the right time, at the right place, in order to achieve that goal. And again, a lot of these things, for some of you guys that's been within the ecosystem, may seem like, yeah, we have that ready, we're going to have this ready, we're going to have that ready, and so forth. But the proposition here is the how. I've been in so many conferences, so many conversations also, so many forums and dialogues, right, that if we are stuck with the macro labels, then we will be constantly stuck. Because the conversation will not be able to move beyond. Again, what I'm trying to share here today, ladies and gentlemen, is a hybrid of concepts and practicality of execution. Concepts are easy, but how do we derive the practical solutions so that we can execute? We can't just continue conversations and not execute. So we've got about the high density of actors, the players within the space itself, ensuring close proximity. But close proximity as we speak, it's not necessarily just physical play. Physical play helps, right? But again, as Cohen mentioned just now, the global connectedness. And that was partially how the GE Community Summit was designed. The lab sessions that you see in parallel running within these 2 days are designed to bring micro communities together of common interest. And because you've got like-minded people together, you're able to foster better collaboration. And that's been the general design of the whole summit. Strong network collaboration, sharing, this stuff everyone knows. But these are the fundamental building blocks that anchors around building players into the innovation supercluster itself. And just like anything, you can't just put things on paper. This thing needs to be designed. It needs to be designed not just from a pure theoretical blueprint, right? And how we drive these things has got to be as agile as how a startup drives their ventures too. Because if we spend too long of a time trying to put a huge blueprint of an innovation supercluster, then by the time we kickstart things, it would have probably moved on, and things would have shifted. So, and these are the little changes. It may sound trivial, but it actually shifts how the direction moves. it actually shifts the kind of outcomes that may happen as you move forward. And these are pillars that we all know, right? In any entrepreneurship ecosystems per se. These are the key actors that's there. You got the entrepreneur, you got the academics, the capital, government, and also corporate. Again, ladies and gentlemen, while this is not new, but what we're talking about is the how and the practical how. Because without the practicality of the how, right, we can talk about innovation superclusters, we can talk about future industries, we can talk about all these things. Again, as I said, it will just be conversations. So there are a few ways that we've been toying around in trying of building this innovation superclusters around those 5 key themes. And there are a few ways for different players, different actors as we speak just now, can come into play in making sure the desired aspiration happens, right? So if you've got all these 5 key places, you could naturally look at building something, or something's already out there, maybe raw, merging it up, buying it up, partnering. We all speak about partnerships normally, but the key word here is partnerships with unlikely partners. Partnerships with unlikely partners gives new possibilities. New possibilities that takes you out from the traditional mindset, traditional framing that everyone has within their comfort zone of the sectors itself. Only then you can drive faster innovation. Because otherwise, no matter what you do, we're all human beings, and we've got to accept that reality also, right? If you're in a particular sector for the longest of times, you will have mental fixedness on your thought processes. You will not be able to push that boundaries that we're talking about. You will not be able to design that exponential experience that we're talking about. Co-investments, and we've been talking a lot of corporations right now in trying to make sure that there's a parallel track in terms of whatever they're doing within the organization and what they can do with the possibilities of outside their organization. And for me personally, that's the exciting part. That's the exciting part because the possibilities are just limitless. Yeah? Co-development. Corporations may have a very clear vision, co-creation, designing things together in making sure things can happen, creates a better alignment. But these are different strategies depending on actors again, depending on appetite of the organizations, depending, when I say appetite, organizations today, corporations today, have a very diverse level of appetite. From risk-averse to not so risk-averse. And your strategies, depending on the DNA of the organization, has got to be an adaptive behavior. So again, ladies and gentlemen, at least at MaGIC, we believe that in order to propel exponential entrepreneurs, in order to shift people's thinking along these lines, innovation superclusters is an important element. And it's not done by a singular person. It's got to be done, right, with a common shared vision of the parties that comes together. Otherwise, it will not work. But it requires everyone to put their egos aside. With the only thing that is put forward, with the hope, the aspiration, the vision to want to create a better future ahead. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I open up to the floor. If there's any questions with regards to exponential entrepreneurs, how do we come together with regards to shaping together the innovation superclusters? How do we blend entrepreneurs who are more tech versus to someone that's slightly non-so-tech. Floor's open.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Ghazi.
Oh, all right. Let me ask you this question. When I see what David was talking this morning, Cohen, and yours, I know see there is a common trend of total dependency on the hand. You know, leadership has three, the heart, the head, and the hand. Now, if we are talking about the future, how are we defining in Malaysia for that matter? Is it the future society or the future economy? Because if we use future economy, it's still capitalism. We have to change the way the narrative of the nation or civilization. My point to you, what the Prime Minister talking of the 5 areas, where is fashion? Where is art? Where is culture? Men are not made to be robots.
Yes.
That's our problem. Now, if we talk about Asian and Western civilization, we're not driven by technology per se.
Right.
Intelligence is not a question of having logic. It is what is about having the intellectual cognition, which what Professor Syed Muhammad Naqib talks about, the internal senses, which our modern education does not produce. That's why we are having non-thinking man, non-soulful society. If we want to solve the problem of modern civilization, we have to change totally our script for what you have been seeing. Thank you very much.
Very quick question, Dr. Das. Well, the thing is this. While the 5 elements were mentioned, right, in bringing societies and people together, you've got to be able to put the power on people's hands to be able to design that. I am totally in agreement with you about blending arts, culture, and all these things that comes into play, right? But you've got to make sure that those things are embedded. And when we talk about innovation superclusters per se, right? So we've got an art and energy lab that we're talking with some participants right now. And the idea for that is literally, as what you said, infusing culture and also technology. Now, why I did not articulate that as explicit, and that may be your point that you were asking us now, right, is that those space is the space that people are comfortable with today. The premise that we put across are not to say that this needs to be a purely 100% digital world per se. Not what I'm trying to say also, right? Coming from an entrepreneurial background, I don't believe technology dictates. Innovation superclusters, I will speak just now. And even as you speak innovation, right, at MaGIC, our belief and school of thought, when we mention the word innovation, while the tendencies sometimes tend to be very technology-oriented, it's really about doing things differently, doing things well enough, doing things with meaning, right? So I do take note what you are sharing across, Dr. Ghazi. On the same page with you with regards to that. But this needs to be blended together with those elements across. And I agree with Irvin Cohen just now. And partly why I am more attuned to a term of sustainable cities versus smart cities is to the exact same point, right? Again, it's bringing it down to the how, because it's now trying to shift people to imagine. So these are just labels so that people start imagining differently, but bringing in communities together so that the soul needs to be in every aspect. I mentioned just now also about taking the lens of the view of the people and society, not the technology per se. So I hope that addresses a little bit, but I am on the same page with you with regards to that. I'm a believer that innovation can happen with or without tech, but we cannot put aside entirely the technology aspects because those are potential levers. But we cannot start the conversation from a technology front because you will not get the right answer, right? So even when, actually if you ask me, if we take in the context of Industry Revolution 4.0, may not be directly to your question just now, when the conversation tends to focus on what is done at the back end. What are the sensors to increase productivity and so forth? Well, there are benefits to that. But I think the starting point of an Industry Revolution 4.0 should be looking at the businesses, looking at the sector first, and see where that shift is potentially going to be. Decide how are you going to interact and react with that shift, and then look at your back-end investment of Industry Revolution 4.0. Because otherwise, you're going to be suckered into this wave of conversation to get into smart automation without having full immersion, right? The entrepreneur needs to understand, right? Because smart automation improves efficiency only to a certain level at the productivity end. So if you jump the gun without the business strategy in place, you will not be able to yield the full potential of Industry Revolution 4.0. But if you understand where the market is going to potentially shift, you may not be entirely sure, yeah, but you've got to know that kind of a radar. Then you'll be able to design whatever investments that you put at the back end to be able to be attuned to that. And you'll be able to look at new models of delivering those solutions. New service delivery, new product offerings that comes from your core product services right now. So, and I think the country's strategy with regards to Industry Revolution 4.0 or even in the region needs to kind of shift that a little bit so that you got that balancing act, because you can do investments, but if the sector is going to shift, your investments are going to go to waste. Right? Thank you, Dr. Ghazi. Any other questions? Cool. Well, if there's none, I'm more than happy to take up questions on the side. For anybody who's interested to actually look at how can we kind of mash things up together. How can we ensure that, you know, the things that you guys are talking about, the things that you guys are thinking of could come to reality, and even to, like Dr. Ghazi's question just now, in terms of making sure that in things that we do, there's always that soul aspect within the elements also. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and I hope you got make sense of the conversation this afternoon. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Ashran. Now we're going to take a